What's up, y'all, and welcome back to Found Bytes, a game review series. My name is Brian, and I'll be your host. If you don't know about us, we're all about finding and testing out small, high-quality video games. This is a podcast that aims to respect your time and money as a gamer and a consumer by sifting through storefronts and sales to find those gems that may be worth your precious resources. But enough about the show. Let's get into our next game. Anomaly Agent is the game for this week's episode. Anomaly Agent is a 2D action platformer by Few Games. That was released in 2024. It's Pheu. Few. I'm assuming that's how it goes. And the game is available on PC, Mac, Switch, Xbox One, Series X and S, PS4, and PS5, pretty much everywhere. Now for me, as I was introduced to the game and as I've been playing it, it's very fast-paced action a la Katana Zero, Hotline Miami, where you're going through these short sequences and you die and you reload. Some of them are really tough challenges and encounters with a lot of combat depth, so you'll be dealing with a lot of enemies at once eventually with a lot of different needs that need to be met in order to take them down. So a lot of sort of in-your-face stuff, but again, that satisfying die, quick reload that we've seen in Hotline Miami and Katana Zero, really prevalent here. But it's also a linear narrative, so think of like Narita Boy, and it has that same sort of digital cyberpunkness. So games like Narita Boy, Jack Move, Headlander that we've seen before, and it's also pixelated along the lines of games like Jack Move, but just quick, fun, silly, quirky, and that's been my experience so far. The game released with an MSRP of $14.99 on console. On Steam, it's listed as $11.99, so I'm not sure about that price difference there. If you're playing straight through the game, should only take you about 5 hours if you want to get all the extras, get all the different upgrades, and there is a New Game Plus mode where you can kind of continue and get all that stuff. It might take you a bit over 8, maybe to 9 hours. I got this on sale for $5.24 on PlayStation. I've been playing it on my PS5 and on my Portal, and I just beat the campaign. It took me about 5 to 6 hours. I started a little bit on New Game Plus, but I don't think I'll go too much further into that. The game has no announcement of physical releases or a vinyl soundtrack, although I would be very interested if that were to come out. And the development team, Few Games, they're a small Turkish team, and I believe this was their first game, but now they're working on a different game called Anomaly President, and I think it's a little bit different stylistically, or at least genre-wise, because I think it's a roguelike. And before I had purchased this game, I hadn't heard anything about it. I just saw it on a PSN sale, looked at the scores. The average was over 4, and that's normally enough for me to kind of take a deeper dive, and so I did just that. Alright, let's talk gameplay for Anomaly Agent. So this is a 2D action platformer, so some of the basics, you're moving left to right at one speed, there's no running or anything like that, but you can dodge roll, and this is something you can use to go through enemies. You can go under platforms or walls that are hanging so that there's only like a small amount of space to get through, so you'll roll under them. And you can do the dodge roll in quick succession, and I tested this out just recently. Like, I didn't realize how quickly you could roll and roll and roll. and you will need that for some of the platforming and some of the hazards that you have to deal with. You can jump, and when you jump close to the edge of a ledge, you will ledge grab off of the end, and then you just kind of jump again to get up. And you'll have melee attacks, so you can melee swipe, and then as you're moving around, there will be things that you can interact with, and you'll see a little dot show up that will show you that you can interact with it, and then when you get there, the prompt will show up to press on PlayStation. It's the circle button. And traversing in this game, so it is a 2D platformer, but you can go screen to screen, but also the screen extends, so sometimes you might be in one screen or one sequence, and either you're moving more right or left and the screen moves with you, or it's up and down. Some of these sequences will have you platforming up and down and so on and so forth. You will get to the edge of a screen and you'll know how you can progress forward because of light indicators, but basically you'll just go to the edge of a wall and then you'll go to the next screen. A lot of platforming, so you'll have moving platforms, you'll have timed hazards that you have to either jump for or roll through. There's a lot of lasers and stuff like that, so you'll be rolling through lasers. There are different trampoline aspects that you'll be using to kind of get over hazards or jump bigger gaps. And of course there'll be pits at times, like you can fall into a pit and then you'll die and you'll have to reset. But there'll also be like puzzles that you're dealing with. It could just be logical puzzles or physical puzzles that you have to get around. So a lot of them are going to deal with like switches that you have to hit and it'll move a platform, or it might open doors in sequence. That's a puzzle that we've seen a couple times where you have to like figure out in what sequence to hit the switches so that all the doors are open at the same time. And also a lot of your traversal is going to deal with combat encounters, which we will get to in a little bit. But let's talk about progression of the game. This is very linear, so it's very much like Katana Zero, where you're not really in control of the area you're going to next, or like choosing on a map or something like that where to travel. It's just like the game takes you there. And so of course there's going to be gated progress. So again, you might be in a screen and you have to progress to a certain place, and then once you get there, again, that wall that'll turn like a pinkish hue will indicate like, hey, you can progress to the next area. Or it could be that you need to get to like an opening or a portal or something like that and interact with it. But when you get to sort of the linear progression or something is happening in the story, there might be little cutscenes where there's dialogue between you and another character. There could be dialogue options. And then, of course, there could be combat encounters that will gate that progress so that you can't progress until you beat all the enemies. Or you have to hit puzzles or switches or things like that, again, gating that progress. There is some limited exploration, even less than a game like Narita Boy, where there were multiple paths that you could go. There's always going to be the same path, but in a screen, you might notice that like, oh, there's a platform over this way, or I can go in two directions. And then if you go one direction, you'll find that there's just like an optional chest to pick up currency. So that's really the only times where you're exploring or you have options to go, but it's not like you're going down a winding path or a rabbit hole where like you would get confused of where to go back. It's just like a little off to the side. Oh, there's a chest here. I have to make sure to get that. It is gated in terms of going forward. So once you go to another screen, you can't go back. So you might miss some of the optional chests, but the game is really just trying to push you forward. So you won't be able to go back. So it's very linear in that aspect. And of course, there's also no central location. There are some times where you get brought back to like a story place, but it depends on like where you're at in the chapter. The game is split into like 4 chapters and an epilogue. But again, you don't have control over where you're going. So you might go back to like the base or something like that, but then you're just there for a cutscene and then it takes you to the next place anyway. And as you're progressing around in this game, you will find currencies and upgrades that you have to utilize in order to keep traversing. So this does have some Metroidvania-like aspects where you're upgrading, you're getting certain traversal things, and it might be to be able to progress, but it also might be for combat's sake. So you're going to get double jump, you're going to get your own projectile, you're going to get a move to parry, you're going to get special moves, things like that. And again, this will come up in the story, and it's very linear, so it's not like you're going to backtrack and be like, oh, I remember that place where I could have broken that, but I didn't have the thing. You're never going to find that. It's always just going to be like, hey, now you can do this, and now here it is. The main currency is you're going to find money, and you'll get this from killing enemies. You'll get this from finding those optional chests. And then you'll also find that there's another form of currency when you're talking to people, and sometimes you have dialogue choices that will have consequences, and they'll be indicated differently. But basically, you're going to get this special currency of how you respond in some of these dialogue choices. So it's like the good choice or the bad choice. It should feel pretty obvious as you're reading it. But if you pick the good choice, you'll get like the happy face from like the comedy and tragedy masks. So you'll get the comedy one or the tragedy one. And depending on how many you have of each, like you can use those in sort of these kiosks where you're able to upgrade. And every now and then you'll come across these kiosks. They're sort of spaced out throughout the game as you're progressing through. And when you get to them, you'll be able to unload a lot of the currency to purchase upgrades for some of your melee attacks, some of your ranged attacks. They can add bonus effects. It can improve some of the effects that you get from some of the Metroidvania traversal moves that you pick up along the way. And you're also able to upgrade your max health. So you'll either have to get 4 or 5 pieces to do it. I think it's 5. But you will find these sometimes in those chests that are like the optional exploration ones that you'll come across. Sometimes they'll have currency. Sometimes they'll have max health upgrades. But you can also buy them at these kiosks if you have enough of either, I think it's the Happy Face currency. So you'll be slowly upgrading your max health as you find these pieces, and also upgrading your moves to increase the damage or increase the bonus effects, things like that. So let's talk pacing, and of course this is going to hinge a lot on the combat encounters. So I will say that there's a pretty straight linear increase in difficulty of the combat encounters, and it kind of goes alongside of the platforming, because slowly in these combat encounters you're going to have to also worry about hazards and platforming at the same time. And again, linked to the abilities that you're going to get just as you progress through the game, that's going to increase the complexity of the encounters. Now, a lot of these encounters are going to be in open rooms where you can kind of mess around with enemies, but also maybe like go away from them or go up a platform or two and like take a breather. But sometimes you'll have these locked sequences where like you do have to go into an area and the door will close behind you and you'll have to kill enemies and come out alive on the other side. And the way this progresses, like you'll start out with just fighting single enemies, and then you'll slowly get encounters where there'll be multiple enemies, and then finally like groups that are in waves, like you'll kill a bunch, and then all of a sudden like 5 more will wave in or portal in at the same time. So again, increasing that complexity. And as you progress, your moveset arsenal is going to grow. So we talked about having a dodge roll, so you can roll through enemies. You can melee swipe and you'll get like different combos. Like if you hit 3 in a row, you'll do like a special finisher or stuff like that. But again, the things that you learn along the way, so you'll learn to be able to jump and roll in the air. You'll learn to parry enemy attacks, which is going to be vital. You also get a second melee attack. So on PlayStation, the first one is the square button, and then you'll get the triangle button. So there's sequences where if you do like square, square, triangle, you'll get a special combo. Also jumping in the air, doing a down pound with the triangle. So all those things you'll slowly learn along the way. Also, in these combat encounters, there'll be items on the ground sometimes, and these could be like med kits. So if you're low on health, one of these might pop off from an enemy when you kill them, and that'll give you like maybe, a third of your health back or something like that. You might find things on the ground that you can kick, like there are ninja stars or bombs that if you just walk by them and press the circle button, your character will kick them in a certain direction, and that can damage enemies. Also, as you kill enemies, they will drop guns. And this is right out of like Hotline Miami. You can pick up guns. They have a certain amount of ammo, and you can use them as part of your combo. So if you do like 2 melees and then the gunshot, it might multiply up the damage a little bit. But once you're out of ammo, if you shoot the gun, which is R2, it'll throw the gun at the enemy. So again, right out of Hotline Miami. Eventually you'll get power moves, and these are sort of like AoE moves that can be recharged as you damage more enemies. I think you wind up with 3 of them at the end of the game. This is a cool way to just kind of like clear out a bunch of enemies if you're feeling overwhelmed. And you will get a throwable that can stun enemies, and this will also have a recharge. I think it's just a timed recharge. This will allow you to hit or stun enemies. This can also be used to interact with the environment if there are puzzles or switches far away. And anytime you get something new, what's really nice is that the game has a short little tutorial screen that showcases how to use the new move, and there are words on the screen telling you how to use it. So in that aspect, the pacing is actually really nice and very helpful. The enemies that you'll come across, so there are a lot of tiers of enemies, like the lower level enemies, and then slowly you'll go up a tier, up a tier. And as you're going into a screen, like you'll see enemies kind of moving in a path, and they're going to move around until you get close enough so that you aggro them, they see you, And then once you're in combat, what's really interesting is if you have two enemies that are like the same tier, what they can do is if they're walking towards you and they happen to be standing like relatively in the same location, they will actually fuse together to go up a tier and make like the next level enemy. So this is something that you need to be aware of because the higher level enemies are obviously more difficult. So you maybe want to try to kill a lot of the lower level enemies if they're in like a large group so they don't fuse together and then really make your life difficult. But they will vary in terms of what they can do. A lot of the lower level ones are just melee. When they get close to you, they'll have a tell for when they're going to attack and then they'll attack you. As you get higher up, that melee range or the reach of their melee attack can vary and get stronger. Some of them will have one move that they always do. Again, higher level up, they're going to have multiple moves or like a different move set for you to be ready for. Some will have ranged attacks. Some will be able to do ranged attacks and melee you if you get close to them. Some will have ranged attack, melee attack, be able to dodge, do all kinds of things, really have sort of their own move set. And then you'll get into some of the advanced things. You'll see enemies that have shields that you have to deal with, some that can teleport, some that will crouch and shoot, which can make it a real pain in the butt to deal with them. And then finally leading up to boss encounters. And these can be really tough and really rewarding for fighting them. A lot of them took me like maybe 5 or even 10 tries. But some of these will have crazy move sets and may have different phases that you have to deal with. Some of them are just single enemies. Some of them are like duos or will have minions. Love the boss design in this game. And of course, what's going to be your bread and butter with all these kinds of enemies and even bosses is the parry mechanic. So what's really nice is when an enemy is about to attack, a little exclamation point will pop up above their head so that you know how to sort of react. But some of the advanced enemies will have different timings for their different attacks. But if you parry right when they attack, it'll sort of stun them for a second. And then if you hit them with something, they can sort of fly back and you can get a big damage hit. You can also parry projectiles, which is really nice for some of the enemies that are primarily ranged. You can just shoot the projectile back at them. But again, it's all timing. And so with all of this going on, just some strategies or things to keep in mind, this can get very fast paced. And there are a lot of different things that can be happening at the same time. You're going to be rolling, doing a swipe combo, trying to parry somebody, roll again, rinse and repeat, because you're going to have like a couple enemies maybe bum rushing you in melee, and then you've got a guy at the back who's also shooting you, and that shot will go all the way through the enemies and come to you. So you're dealing with a lot of different timings of things, because even if you have two enemies that melee and they're different levels or different tiers, the timing of their attack is going to be different. So I found that like the parry that you'll have to do, you might have to parry like 2 times in a row to parry both enemies that are hitting you at the same time and a shot that's coming in from afar. And sometimes I found that like you can melee and then almost cut yourself out of the melee to parry to get that timing, like interrupting yourself. This is like a 50-50 shot that this works, but it can be something that like you're pressing something and immediately deciding to parry right after that, and it might work, it might not. There's a lot of different buttons that you use in these sequences, like dodge rolling, parrying, melee 1, melee 2, like trying to do power moves, trying to shoot your gun. A lot of different things you can do, and I found that I'm doing them very quickly in sequence, and sometimes, maybe it's just me getting old, but sometimes I'll parry when I meant to dodge. Like I'll get confused by the buttons because I'm moving between them so fast. But at the same time, it's not button mashy. It's just very intense, and so you have to be ready for these quick sequences. And it can be very satisfying when you destroy a whole horde of enemies and you didn't even get hit, which is very possible. You'll also be able to get status effects on enemies. These are part of the upgrades that you'll purchase. This is something that I don't really notice it's happening while it's happening, I guess because so much crap is going on at the same time. But like I think that these do have effects. Like some of your melee attacks can deal electricity damage, which I guess will stun enemies. Sometimes you'll be able to upgrade your ranged attacks or bullets that you deflect that will poison enemies. So I think maybe it drains their health over time. I don't know. There's so much going on that I'm not really noticing it, but it's nice that things like that can stack. And then of course you'll have the different power moves, but they have different trajectories. So one of them is like a slam down, and like everyone sort of right near you will get stunned or will shoot up into the air. Another is like you're just shooting one way, like almost as a bullet, and so it's going to hit a bunch of enemies in a row. And another one is Like you have two guns that pop out on either side, and so you'll hit enemies on both sides that are kind of further away from you. So the context of when to use each of these is going to depend on sort of where you are, where you're facing, and where the enemies are. And finally, in terms of accessibility, there are 3 difficulty levels. I played it on normal. I died a bunch. I mean, it's definitely a game like Hotline Miami. Like, part of the game is just dying and like the quick reset. That's pretty satisfying. But for a lot of bosses, I died like maybe 5 to 10 times, maybe even some beyond that. But I don't know the variation at the difficulty levels. I don't know what easy makes easier or what hard makes harder. It's probably things like enemy health or aggressiveness, things like that. Having those visual options of like helping you out, like you can check the box that allows for the exclamation point or the coloration of the enemy to tell you when they're attacking, but you can also take that off, which is interesting. I haven't played it with it off. I would imagine it's more challenging. The game does constantly save, like anytime you open a chest or I guess kill an enemy horde or go to a new screen, you'll see the save icon come up and you can exit anytime and it'll bring you right back, which is very nice. What's also nice is anytime you go to a new screen, your health will reset. So if you just had an encounter and you have like no health left, but you killed everyone, you're good to go. You go to the next screen, full health. Awesome. And then finally, there is that new game plus mode, which is pretty nice because I didn't get all of the upgrades in one playthrough, but when you jump into new game plus, everything carries over. So I think that if you wanted to get all the stuff in the game, you could easily do that with new game plus. So it's nice to have that option. All right, let's talk about the vibe of Anomaly Agent, and let's start with the visuals. So the game is pixelated. It reminds me a lot of Jack Move, which is a game we did a little ways back. Sort of minimal facial details, like you might see some facial hair, like who has a beard, what their hair looks like. And you'll definitely see the color variation and like their skin, their hair, their clothing. So you can easily differentiate that, but you're not going to see like expressions or anything like that. It's too blurry in that respect. It also reminds me a lot of Dark Side Detective a little bit. Like you're not really getting the character from the face, but you are getting it from sort of the dialogue, but also their mannerisms a little bit. And the characters and the enemies that you see, again, their mannerisms, like they do kind of make silly movements. When your character walks, it's hilarious. Like you've got these thin legs, but it's almost like it reminds me a lot of like Disco Stew from The Simpsons. Like you're in a white suit and it looks like you've got like platform shoes, but your legs are so skinny and they look so silly as you're walking. It's really interesting, as well as with some of the enemies. There's one tier that like you've got these enemies that are in like blue suits and they have sunglasses on and they almost have like an Elvis haircut, slick back, and they're walking with like a little bit of pizzazz or almost like Ace Ventura even. So just having that character really come out is really nice, especially visually. The accessories that you see enemies have. The dress variation is going to be an indicator for sort of the tier of enemy, what color their outfit is, if they're wearing a vest, things like that, but also the size of them. So as you get bigger enemies, that's going to signify like a higher difficulty or a higher tier. The environments of what you're going to see, a lot of like factories, metallic stuff going on in the background, very mechanical, colors like a slate, blues and grays, but a lot of accent in other ways. You're definitely going to see electronics, machines. You're going to pass by like arcade machines, which are interesting. You can interact with a lot of the things like that. You can smash things in the background. You might even get some currency from it. But you will see those color pops. Like you'll see different lights or neon signs that light up, or different computers that you interact with, whether you have to switch them to move a platform. But you'll see like the color pops of yellows and greens and bright blues and things like that. Indicators are also definitely a big deal. So if something has a hazard, like an electric hazard, like you'll definitely see static electricity or the jolts moving around. So you'll see this on walls that you might have to avoid or roll under. You'll see this on platforms that you don't want to touch. Definitely the enemy attack indicator is vital for parrying, but also if an enemy has a shield, like you're going to see like a very blue hue in front of them, which makes it obvious. Some of the enemies, when you hit them enough, will have an AoE explosion, and so you'll see like a giant red circle around them, kind of telling you to get the hell out of the way because it's going to blow up, as well as enemy health bars. They'll like pop up above them as soon as you see them and start to damage them. Also, you're interacting with things, so the prompts that come up, like you'll see a dot above an item that says you can interact with it, as well as the dialogue. There's this interesting like white versus yellow color differentiation, so an item that you interact with that'll advance the story or like take you to the next place will be in yellow, but something that you're just interacting with will be white. Same thing for your dialogue choices. The times where you can make a dialogue choice that'll give you that happy face or sad face currency, those are going to be in yellow. So that white to yellow differentiation is really trying to communicate to you. In terms of the themes and the setting, so we're looking at futuristic, cyberpunk. You've got robots and clones and teleporting and even time travel. Really feels right at home, especially alongside games like Jack Move, Headlander. You'll definitely feel a lot from those games in here. And the use of technology, hitting switches to moving platforms. There'll be flying cars a lot just in the story and in sequences that you see. There's also this idea of like big corporation or an agency that's like controlling things. Like you're on this mission. I don't really know what your purpose is, and you're slowly finding that out by the end of the game. It's still kind of vague though. A lot of twists and turns, like who is right, who is who. There's a little bit of like almost the Minority Report. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but I get a lot of feel of that. Like something's going on, and like, are you a pawn or are you going to take control of it? Things like that. And a lot of character in this game. So anytime you go into a boss fight, there'll be like an intro screen where you see like, a comic book version of them, and it gives their title, which is a really nice touch. A lot of recurring characters that'll come up. Especially with the whole time travel stuff, but their growth, their progression, like through their dialogue, what they're learning, or just kind of getting a sense of their character. There is some growth and progression in some characters, even in such a short game, which is nice. But overall, there's just this underlying silliness and this wit. Certainly with a lot of the dialogue interactions, the things that you interact with certain NPCs about, the choices that you can make, like the ones that give you the happy faces or the sad faces. Some of them made me laugh out loud, just like, oh, my character could be a dick here by saying this. It really comes through sort of that fun lightheartedness. You'll be having sequences where your character's dancing or kicking people. You'll even have a sequence where you're in disguise, so there's like a little bit of stealth stuff going on. But a lot of stuff like that, just fun, positive energy. There's really a lot of wit and a lot of silliness. And again, reminds me a lot of games like Headlander. I know there was a sequence where you could dance with different robots. And then the idea of choices that you make kind of having an effect on the game. There are some choices that will pop up, I think, a little later. It seems very subtle, but the game does give you a lot of choices, and I think tries to make them have consequences at times. And then finally, the audio. The music in this game is so good. It's got that 70s, that 80s, just high energy, goes back and forth between them, like a lot of techno, but a lot of rock. Definitely pulls from games that we've talked about before, like Saturday Morning RPG, Narita Boy, Headlander I keep talking about, Jack Move, Hotline Miami, Katana Zero. Like, as you're going through these enemy sequences, like you're feeling this like pump of energy and like just positive, almost like disco, techno, and just that coupled with like dying very quickly and resetting and then going through these encounters again. Just a lot of fun vibes. I really hope this game comes out with a vinyl soundtrack because I really did enjoy the audio for this game. All right, let's wrap up the conversation about Anomaly Agent. This was a great, compact 2D action platform experience for me. A lot to love here, and really a depth of challenge. Some of these encounters, these bosses, I really liked a lot of their designs. I definitely had some tough times with them. Nothing that I was really bashing my head in about, but a lot of just like jumping back into sequence and like, all right, let me give it another shot. It's an interesting game because it really lays the groundwork for an expanded game after this. I know they're working on another game, Anomaly President. I think it's more roguelike, which I'm not too thrilled about, but I hope they would come back to something like this and make it a larger experience, like the size of like a Headlander or something like that, because I feel like they really have a lot of depth with what they know how to do, with combat sequences, with giving upgrades, things like that, the pacing of that. So I really hope to see something even a little bigger from them. A lot of charm, a lot of character, the silliness, again, really reminded me of Headlander, a killer OST. Like, I just love the music in this game. And of course, the idea of these sequences, these piecemeal challenges where you're fighting enemies, quick reload, very much satisfying that Hotline Miami itch. So if you're somebody who liked Hotline Miami and Katana Zero, I think you would really dig this as well. In terms of value, I feel like 15 isn't bad. That's the price on console. It's interesting that Steam is at 12. I feel like that seems a little more fitting. Again, I got it for $5 and I feel like that was a steal. I really enjoyed this experience at $5 and I beat it in 5-6 hours. What, $1 an hour for a really cool experience. I think that's great value for me. And I have seen it on sale a bunch of times as well recently. But overall, just great, fun, silly, challenging game. Really kept me smiling. And a perfect palate cleanser between two massive games, just to kind of, occupy yourself, but also have a nice, simple, fun experience. And I think that with the difficulty levels, this could be a good experience for everyone. So I do highly recommend this game. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Stay tuned for our next episode to see what new game we found for you.